Big day.
Big day. Something feels different. Are we somewhere else?
No, actually, we're not. It's a very big day with very little changing, which is Ruminate is now part of the MacStories podcast universe. So, welcome to MacStories, Ruminate and Robb.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've already been kicking around MacStories for a while, helping us out with some development stuff. But, we brought Magic Rays of Light over to MacStories, and we thought that Ruminate would be a perfect fit too. So you and I talked about it, and Ruminate is now part of MacStories. But it's really not changing. I mean, we're still going to do the same schedule every Tuesday, every other Tuesday, I guess, not every Tuesday, and same format, same kind of nonsense, snacks, occasional video games, the weird web. I think the weird web is like kind of where I've been my head's been at with Ruminate lately, which is like the whole thing that we've been talking about over the last several weeks, which is like, well, we're kind of at this point where with the descent of Twitter into madness and the re-rise of the indie web that never really went away, but people notice again, and all that kind of stuff. It's like, now's a really good time for the kind of stuff that you and I have been talking about all along.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you say, we're not changing anything. We're not going to suddenly, turn into one of your other shows that you already have on MacStories, because that doesn't make any sense.
We're not going full MacStories corporate here.
No,
MacStories is particularly corporate anyway. But yeah,
but we're not going to start talking about shortcuts or iPads or all the other things that you know very well that I don't use or try not to use.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, that's why this Ruminate's such a good fit with MacStories, because we really don't talk about the same kind of stuff that Federico and I do on App Stories or we do with MacStories Unwind or any of that stuff. I mean, there's maybe a tiny bit of overlap with some of the video game stuff that we do, but that's about it. And I think you and I have different enough tastes in those areas that it's not really as much. It's more of a topical overlap than it is an actual conversation overlap. So I think we'll be fine there as well. And I don't know. I don't know about you, but I feel like you have been very deep into doing a great job of like discovering a lot of really cool websites and projects on your website recently. And there's a lot of that going on, a lot of people doing things. And that's one of the things that I hope that we can highlight a lot when we're going forward. And we've been doing it, and I just feel like that's kind of going to be our bread and butter for a while, which I think is kind of exciting and fun, because it's as traumatic as some things are on the web right now, in the sense that there's a lot of companies are failing, a lot of things aren't going right, but it's also an opportunity, I think, for a lot of individuals to kind of rise up and become the replacement for those things and do some really interesting creative things.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting blogging platforms, which we spoke about a few episodes ago, and even sort of like hosting platforms where, not in the traditional sense, but in the way it's just making it easy for people to publish a website or a blog or a podcast, whatever it is they want to do. There's a lot of interesting stuff popping up. Like search engines is another one, which we spoke about last episode. So, yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting time to be talking about this stuff.
So, if you're brand new to Ruminate, welcome to the nonsense. Welcome to the nonsense. We do a lot of things here. Like, we do talk about fun snacks. I mean, I think if you go back to episode 1, we talked about the pizza that had burgers in the crust. And I don't even remember who the YouTuber was, so that was named after. I'd have to go back and look. But there was a YouTuber who had like a signature pizza at Pizza Hut that had hamburgers or cheeseburgers in the crust, which struck me as very disgusting, which meant we had to talk about it. And we've also talked about the KFC Crocs. Remember when Kentucky Fried Chicken? They put a chicken wing on the top of a crock, and I think they might have been scratch and sniff too, or maybe I'm confusing that with something else. Where you could scratch on the plastic and it would smell like fried chicken, because who doesn't want their feet to smell like fried chicken, right, Rob?
Right. And speaking of KFC, let's not forget I went out for the good of the show and had that terrible KFC burger where instead of bread it was just 2 bits of chicken.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
That was not good.
That has, I think that has made a comeback at KFC a couple of times since then, at least in the U.S. I don't know if it's been a global thing or not, but yeah. So there's that. There's the weird web, of course, which I like to think of Ruminate as kind of the tagline being bringing you the weird web every 2 weeks, and the video games. So welcome if you're new. I hope you stick around and check it out. We've got a lot to talk about today. We should probably dig into the rest of the show and talk about we talked about AI and the damage it's doing to the web last week, and I had some spicy takes that I think incited a lot of people to write about it. It was kind of nice. I feel like, especially when it comes to something like the Arc browser, which I felt like when I was talking about that, I felt like I was going out on a limb because so many people are into Arc, and turns out there are a lot of people who are quietly concerned about Arc in the way that I was not so quiet, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it was a double whammy because you spoke about it on the episode, and then you also wrote about it in issue 408 of MacStories Weekly. And I think, I can imagine a scenario where somebody listened to the podcast and maybe they heard it and they're like, oh yeah, no, maybe I agree. And then I think with having it in the newsletter as well, I think it really, like, having it in those two places, like, really just fired people up to, there's a bunch of blog posts here. This one at the beginning says it started in the Ruminate podcast, went onto the newsletter. Matt Birchler wrote about it as well. There's a bunch of stuff, but as you say, people got, I think you sort of said this thing and people went, I absolutely agree. Finally, like somebody's actually saying, what the hell are Arc doing?
Right. And so what we decided to do, and if you're listening to this and haven't checked it out yet, yesterday on Monday, we published the issue 408 on MacStories proper. So even if you're not a club member, you can read that article and all the other ones, because we just felt like every 6 months to a year, we put out a sample issue, because it's one of those things where it's like people hear us talk about what the club is all about, but if you can't try it, you don't really know if it's something you want to spend your money on. So every now and then we put out a sample. And now with the new system we have for the club, what we're able to do is we just can make it fully public on the club website, so people can go to the club website. And I did a little post on MacStories, just kind of excerpting some of those stories, but people can just go straight to the club website and see what it looks like and how it works right there on the site, which is kind of nice. But yeah, so if you're interested in that story, plus we'll have links in the show notes to Brendan Bigley's post and Matt Birchler, and there's at least one other one that we can put there. But that was a fun conversation. I got it out of my system after both talking to you about it and then writing about it. I mean, talking to you about it was kind of getting my head straight and getting myself organized to put it into writing. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, I think our podcast certainly isn't safe from what tends to happen, which is you talk about these things, I do it as well. I think a lot of people do it. Then you go, oh, this could be a blog post. And then you end up writing about what you've spoken about and expanding on that. So, we're certainly not adverse to doing that as well.
Yeah, exactly. That was my my AI is strip mining the web article. So, all right. But, along those lines, we should talk about Tim Berners-Lee, who wrote an open letter on the 35th anniversary of the World Wide Web. And, he is, in fact, I think it's wild to have a post that somebody writes and that starts out with the line, 3.5 decades ago when I invented the web. I was like, wow. Well, he did do that. And this is, I don't know, I think this is a very thought-provoking post, because it probably goes farther than my personal views are on what's going on with the web, but I do think that it resonated a lot with me. A lot of the discussion about the early promise of the web as a decentralized, long-tail content type of network that then has descended into centralization and data silos that have eroded some of those early values, as well as people's privacy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, before we go any further to that sentence where it says, when I invented the web, there was an interview with him on a TV network a few years ago, and it had his name, and the job title they used was just web developer, which
really?
is, I mean, is technically correct, but I feel like that's definitely on those lines. It's like, yeah, technically he's a web developer, but I mean, think probably more so than I am.
Right, and he's been knighted for it. I mean, this is like it's a big deal, right? He's Sir Berners-Lee, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. Like you say, I think this is a good article. Obviously, I think if anybody's got a good idea of what the intention of it being decentralized was, it's him. Yeah. I don't think there's a lot more to say about it really, other than go and read it. Absolutely, it's not that long. It's not some 5,000 word article that you're going to have to sit down and read. Like it's fairly short, but I think really the crux of it is kind of what we've been talking about, that we need to not have everybody just be on Twitter and that's the only place people are doing microblogging, or everybody be on Instagram and that's the only place people post photos. We need more decentralized, post on your website, or use something federated, or build your own thing if that's what you feel like is going to work for you. But I can't bring myself to be using these services now that are so centralized that firstly your data is never accessible in any reasonable way. I think Threads is making some changes there, like even though it's a Meta product, they're talking about the API they're going to open up, and they're, in theory, they're going to support ActivityPub, which they're still testing, so that is good news. Like I'd rather it wasn't Meta, but it is what it is. But yeah, we definitely need to move away from all of this kind of centralized services where there's like 3 or 4 companies serving the entire internet, basically.
Right. Well, and the thing is, for like decentralization to really be successful, I think there are going to be those uncomfortable moments when companies like Meta are decentralizing, because it's realistically, it's really only going to catch on if it's kind of being done across the board, including by companies like Meta. So, I think that's, to me at least, that's like, yeah, I think everybody should be, have a healthy dose of skepticism when it comes to Meta. On the other hand, I do think that it is somewhat admirable for that they are actually saying the right words. Whether they'll follow through, remains to be seen. But so far, it looks like they actually are committed to it. And they do in this article. He does, his open letter, he does call out Blue Sky and Mastodon in particular, and GitHub as well. But they're, this is more of a high-level discussion more than it is anything else. And it's one of the things that I didn't really directly touch on in my article about AI or our conversation last time, which is, I think that the centralization of the web is part of the AI problem, because what it really made it easy for these AI companies to do is easily mine the web. I mean, look at, how OpenAI has a deal with Reddit now, or, Twitter's doing its own thing with all the data that, for their Grok AI that is, all the posts on Twitter or X now. And so I think that centralization is part of the problem in a sense, and it makes AI even more difficult to deal with today. But, I don't know. I mean, I think decentralization is a great thing. It's always been part of the web, and it ebbs and flows. And I think we're kind of heading back towards a more decentralized web, which I think is a good thing in the long run, even though it is going to cause a lot of disruption, I think, for a lot of people. Oh, yeah. I mean, the disruption, just for individual users. I was talking to a friend yesterday trying to explain Mastodon, and he wasn't familiar with it. Right. And you start sounding like a crazy person at times, and you start talking about instances and federation and all of this kind of stuff. And but I don't just it's not just individuals either. I think it's also companies and independent businesses that have used Twitter in the past. MacStories is a good example. It's if there was a lot of traffic coming from Twitter and now you've had to move to Mastodon or Threads, or maybe somebody's just moved their business to their own website, the traffic is going to be different. You're going to have to be in multiple places if you're running a business, which is that's a more bigger ask, I guess, for a business in some cases, because previously it was just, we're just on Facebook. And now, potentially you've got to be on Mastodon and Threads and maybe Blue Sky
I'm sure there's a few more that are going to pop up at some point.
Right. And that's why I think a lot of these things like ActivityPub are important, because right now it's like people like you and me talking about decentralization, and regular people don't care about kind of the philosophy behind that, or, the ideas behind how that works. It'll catch on when it's something that's completely transparent and something that nobody has to worry about. They just have a new kind, what to them is their new Facebook or their new Threads or their new Twitter or whatever it happens to be. But maybe in that new world, whatever that service is, they can easily move that account and that group of followers to another thing if they want to down the road. So, it's that kind of promise that I think we'll know it's kind of arrived when people don't feel like the need to talk about it as much, maybe.
Yeah. Another sort of interesting story from yesterday. So I was at a hackathon yesterday called Hack Pompey. It's a local one here in Portsmouth, and we were all sort of set up on tables of 7 or 8, and the table behind us were working on a project with ActivityPub and the Fediverse and stuff like that, and there was this like hour-long conversation that went on, because I think there was a few people in their group who weren't familiar with any of it. So that was kind of sort of interesting to hear snippets of that and hear the questions that the people that weren't familiar with it were asking. I kind of sort of still thinking about what I overheard in that conversation, because I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, these are the problems and these are the things that people don't understand. So
right. Absolutely. I mean, it's different. It's not like it's a perfect solution or a perfect replacement for anything that went before it. It's just different, and I think people have to kind of wrap their heads around what's different about it and whether it's better from their perspective. So
yeah, definitely. Should we? I think that's all of our open web stuff. Should we talk about cake and lawsuits? Because that's way more fun.
I do want to hear about cake, because, gosh, you raised Colin the Caterpillar in the MacStories Discord the other day, and I was like, Rob, what's a Colin the Caterpillar?
Mm-hmm. And I immediately told you not to Google it, because I didn't want to. I didn't want you to get spoiled.
I haven't.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, you can click the Wikipedia link we've got there. So Colin the Caterpillar, and I'm sorry, UK people, that you're going to have to listen to me explain this, because you definitely all know what it is. But for the rest of the world, a Colin the Caterpillar is like a what would you call it? Like a chocolate log or a chocolate roll type cake.
Yep.
But it's also covered in chocolate, so it's got like a hard outer shell.
Okay.
And then it has a chocolate caterpillar face on one end. And then usually, and on the top, it has like Smarties, I think it is, or M&Ms, that kind of thing. I think it's Smarties they normally use. And then it has like little white chocolate feet as well. This is a pretty common cake to see at kids' parties, and actually at my office as well. People bring these in for their birthday pretty much, like, fairly regularly. And it's important to note that Colin the Caterpillar specifically is trademarked and copyrighted by Marks and Spencer's.
I see that, because I see a long list of other retailers that have Cecil the Caterpillar and Chris the Caterpillar and Clive the Caterpillar and Clyde the Caterpillar and Curious Caterpillar. There's a list of like a dozen ones here.
Yeah, you've got Wiggles at Sainsbury's. That's a good one.
Yeah. You've got Tesco and Aldi and Sainsbury's, and you've got all these other grocery stores. Or most of these are like grocery stores, I think, right, or convenience stores.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, other than One Stop and Poundland, there, which is the two, and those are sort of smaller, like little convenience shops. The rest of those are all supermarkets in the UK.
Yeah, I've heard of most of these other ones. Yeah.
And what happened, I'm just trying to check. So it was 2021 this happened. So it was 3 years ago now. Marks and Spencer's took Audi to court. Only Audi specifically.
Audi, okay.
For their Cuthbert the Caterpillar cake. Because they had made their... And I'm not sure, I assume it's the same in the US, but you've got Audi and you've got Lidl. these two companies are fairly famous for skirting the rules of what is considered copying and what is like legally distinct in terms of a trademark. So if you walk around these shops, you'll see like their own brand product.
Oh yeah, and they're always, and their whole deal is that they're cheaper than going to the Marks and Spencer, because Marks and Spencer is an expensive store.
Oh, right, exactly, and it's fairly, they have their own brands of, even other famous, Coke and Dr. Pepper and
right,
all of these stuff, and they'll have sort of vaguely similar names. I don't know how they legally get away with it, but clearly their lawyers are smarter than I am. But for whatever reason, Marks and Spencer decided that Cuthbert was far too close, far too similar, and it would, lead, from the Wikipedia page, lead consumers to believe they are of the same standard, and to allow Cuthbert to ride on the coattails of the M&S cake's reputation. And this was a, at least in the UK, like, this was a big deal. Like, this was front page news in some instances. Because Colin, everybody knows Colin the Caterpillar. Like, everybody's been to a birthday party, you say it, and people kind of know what it is. And annoyingly, very boringly, it was just settled behind closed doors. We don't know how much money.
It looks just like the one at Marks and Spencer's. I actually looked up one of the Aldi cakes to see. It's pretty close.
Yeah, I can understand. I mean, in fairness, if you see any of them, they're all pretty similar. Yeah, I can't tell the difference. Not really.
Yeah.
I can tell the difference in the quality, because the Marks and Spencer's ones are significantly better than any of these ones.
Okay.
But I can't tell just by looking at them for the most part.
I wonder if they have these in the Aldis that we have here. We have an Aldi here in town, and we go there. Jennifer goes there because it's near her office. I've only been to it a couple of times because it's not very close to the house, but she sometimes goes there on her lunch break or on the way home and picks up a few things. So I'll have to see if she can find a Cuthbert cake.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to know if this has reached outside of the UK.
Yeah, because I think that's the only one of these stores that we have in North Carolina that is, because Aldi's international. They're all over the place now. But
yeah,
interesting.
And then the final thing I want to mention, because this is just so British, there was a fish and chip shop during all of this that started selling deep fried mini Colin the Caterpillar cakes.
Wow! So, I hope they weren't deep frying them in the fish oil too, in the same fryers as the chips, because the fish and chips. Because yuck. Interesting. Well, that's a good story. I'm going to have to check this out. I have been to Marks and Spencer's many times. They have them in Ireland too. And a lot of times we'll order stuff there for Finn, who lives in Ireland. So, yeah, interesting. All right.
Well, there you go. That's your crash course on Colin the Caterpillar, and now you know.
All right. Well, I have a taste test that I wanted to share with everybody, because I've been exploring Southern snacks, because this is, I'm still relatively new to North Carolina, and there's a whole world of cuisine and foods down here that I had never heard of. And one of them is something called cheese straws, which didn't really sound very appetizing to me. I mean, what in the world is a cheese straw? Turns out it's a pretty simple thing. It's basically I believe like flour and cheese that is mashed together and then pushed through a cookie press. So it makes these long straw-like shapes of sticks of cheese, and then you bake them, and so they come out a lot like a cracker.
Sure.
So and they come out in these kind of like tube-like shapes, which is why they're called straws, even they're not hollow or anything like that. But they're a salty crisp, basically, that you can eat at a happy hour or have with a meal. I don't know. I mean, I don't have a lot to say about them, other than I did go out last week and specifically we were out at a local place having dinner one night, and I saw that they had them. It was kind of one of these places that has both sandwiches and salads and soups, but they also are like a little bit of a market too. and they had cheese straws there. So I grabbed a box and told Jennifer they were for work and brought them home. And they're sitting on our counter. I've eaten a handful of them. They're good. They're not strange or weird. They're just not something I'd ever heard about before. So cheese straws.
It's interesting that these, or at least for you, these are considered a southern food, because, and it's not quite the same as this. It certainly doesn't have that sort of texture, but we have something called cheese straws in the UK. And again, this would absolutely fall into the category of something you might have in a box next to your Colin the Caterpillar cake at a birthday party. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're made the same. I mean, I have some in my kitchen right now. We get them in a packet in Tesco. And I guess they are. I guess cheese, flour, butter. They're certainly not as sort of rustic looking as this picture is. Ours are a bit more sort of uniform, almost like a thick breadstick. Is probably what ours looks like.
All right. Yeah, these are thinner than a breadstick. Well, it depends on your breadstick, I suppose. There are some very thin breadsticks, but yeah, that's interesting. These are more crumbly, like they're a lot like having to Cheez-It. I don't know if you have Cheez-Its in the UK.
Yeah. Oh wow, we don't, but I know what they are.
Okay, they're a lot like that. I mean, those are square cracker, more like a cracker, and this is a little bit more crumbly than the typical cracker, but it's similar because like at least the ones I had were cheddar cheese, so it was a lot like that. But I sent Rob, just so everybody knows, I sent him a couple of articles, one from BuzzFeed. And where was the other one from? The Thrillist.com, which are Southern snack foods. And I thought I would let Rob pick a snack for me to try before the next show.
Yeah, so I mean, I was looking through this. There's some good stuff here.
Yeah.
There's certainly some interesting things here.
I already told him I'm not going to eat cracklin, which is, I guess, in the UK too, which is fried pig skin. I'm not going there. I'm sorry. There are limits. There are lines that will not be crossed.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned this and said it, and again, pork crackling. You can buy packets of pork crackling in basically every pub in the UK.
Okay.
This is like a pretty common between. So we have pork crackling, scampi fries,
okay,
which that's the thing. We'll get to that another time. Or we may have already spoken about those. And peanuts, like those three are pretty much a staple of every pub in the UK that you can just buy a packet from behind the bar.
Right.
But I'm looking through here. You've got
another one on this. Yeah, another one on this list I'm not going to do is chitlins, which are stewed and deep fried pig intestines. That's another one I'm going to take a pass on.
I don't know what okra is.
Yeah. Okra is a vegetable.
Right. Okay. I mean, these look really good. They're like deep fried, battered, fried okra served with some kind of dipping sauce.
Yeah, you will notice that there's a bit of a theme here, which is most of this stuff is fried. There's a lot of fried food on these lists.
I was going to say it's either fried or it's like some kind of like super hot chips.
Right. Heat is another one, or there's like some pickles here. Wickles. It's funny that there's one of these articles has wickles on it, which are a very spicy pickle that's apparently from Alabama. That I could get those in the grocery store in Illinois, so I don't really consider those terribly southern. But
no. What is this? You mentioned this before we recorded, but what is this peanuts and Coke deal? This is so strange to me.
Yeah, I have never heard of this. And I asked Jennifer about it, and she told me that she had heard of this. But these are just dry roasted peanuts that you put in a Coke bottle with the Coke, and you let it float in the Coke, and it supposedly tastes good. It's kind of that sweet and savory thing going on there. Roasted peanuts and Coke.
I'm genuinely tempted to try this now. I'm sure I have both of these ingredients in the house. This
you could just make anywhere you are, because all it is someone took a handful of salted dry roasted peanuts and shoved them into a Coke bottle. So I mean, I'd be happy to try that. I've never had that. There are a lot of things here. Pimento cheese is another one that's very that's more of a South Carolina thing, but that's quite good.
Yeah, I've heard of that. There's certainly, I mean, there's always a lot of cheeses that you can get in. Oh, I stand corrected. Sorry, this is a mayonnaise, cheddar, and pimento peppers.
Yes, it's more of a dip than a cheese itself. It's got cheese, a lot of. It's mostly cheese, but it's a dip really. It's a dip really.
Yeah, I mean, this list, all this is really doing is reinforcing all the stereotypes I've heard about the South, which is
I thought you were going to say is making you hungry.
Oh, it's making me hungry too. But everything's either deep fried or has a lot of cheese in it.
Yeah, there is that.
I mean,
be careful eating here. I mean, there are a lot of salt, a lot of butter, a lot of fried food.
Yeah. This is a beautiful list. Well, obviously these will be in the show notes for people. They can pick their favourites and tell us which ones they like.
All right, very good, very good. Well, I will maybe try to get something else off this list for next time. If you ever have a chance to try fried pickles, I'd go for those. Fried pickles are quite good, but they're hard to do because pickles are a fairly moist thing, and so they don't deep fry super well.
Yeah, I'm gonna see in a like later if I've got some Coke, and because I've definitely got some peanuts, and I'm gonna give that Coke and peanuts a go if I can.
All right, good. Yeah, maybe I'll try that too. I don't have any Coke in the house, but I can certainly get a bottle of Coke. I definitely have peanuts. I know we've got some of those. So
yeah, I'm not sure if we've got Coke because I mean, if we're talking about spicy takes, I much prefer Pepsi to Coke. So
my gosh, I thought I knew you. I thought I knew you, Rob. Come on.
I know. Well, we could end it there. But that's the.
We should.
You can let us know.
Let us know, and let us know if you like Coke versus Pepsi, and subscribe to Ruminate. It would be great to have a lot of new people listen to the show, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks on a Tuesday.
Fantastic. All right, I'll speak to you later.
Okay, bye.